We all know there are so many benefits to reading aloud to children. It can improve their vocabulary, strengthen reading comprehension, and even help to instill a lifelong love of reading. But have you ever considered taking your read-alouds and bumping them up a notch by adding sound effects? In today's video, I'll show you how to do just that and make your read-aloud time an even better, more exciting experience for your children. Welcome back to the Morning Basket Music channel. I'm Leanne, a homeschool mom of 2 kids and a music educator. Read-alouds have always been and continue to be one of my favorite parts of homeschooling. But even as a music teacher teaching in public schools many years ago, I always tried to find a way to work in children's literature into my lessons as often as I could, because I know there are just so many benefits to reading aloud to kids. I have found that introducing the concept of sound effects to kids is actually a pretty easy thing for them to understand because 99% of them have seen some type of cartoon as they've been growing up. So all I would ask them to do is to close their eyes and imagine their favorite cartoon character. So you think about what that character looks like and you imagine they start walking slowly and then a little bit faster. You hear their footsteps and now they're running really fast and they reach the edge of the cliff and they fall off. Now you open your eyes and you ask the children, what did you hear inside your brain when you imagined that character falling off? It might have sounded something like this. Boo! When they hit the bottom, right? When we hear those types of sounds in cartoons or movies, we call them sound effects. Now, you might have to stop and give your kids a little bit of a history lesson here because obviously in modern day, those sound effects are just computer generated, right? Everything is. But think about many, many years ago when the early cartoons or movies were being produced, how did they make those sound effects? Well, they could have used people's voices or people making those sounds with their body, but a lot of times they actually used musical instruments to produce sound effects. So now we have the opportunity to practice making some of our own sound effects to accompany a story that we are reading together. The first thing I want to explain is how you're going to choose a good children's book to do this activity with. Really what you're looking for in whatever story you might choose are repeated sound words or repeated characters that come up a lot throughout the story. I'll go ahead and mention 2 of my favorite books to use. These both come from the Morning Basket Music curriculum, are Mortimer by Robert Munsch and Click Clack Moo by Doreen Cronin. There are lots of other good options for children's books where you can add sound effects, so be sure to check out the video description and I will be listing some of my other favorites to use for this. So here's kind of the point, and I want to show you inside the book Mortimer that I have here. I'm looking for words or repeated sections that happen a lot. And this makes sense, right? Because our kids don't want to be assigned a part that they only get to play or sing one time throughout the entire story because they will quickly lose interest and get bored. But in Mortimer's story, I hear this repeated chorus over and over, almost on every other page of the book. And it says, clang, clang, rattle, bing, bang, gonna make my noise all day. Clang, clang, rattle, bing, bang, gonna make my noise all day. This is the funny song that Mortimer, the main boy in the story, he sings to himself over and over again. So you can see there's lots of opportunities to add these different sound effects. Another kind of literary connection that we can make is if we're choosing books that have onomatopoeia or sound words in them. So an easy way to explain onomatopoeia to our kids is that these are types of words that are spelled exactly like the sound that they make. For example, when you hear the sound of a B on the page, it's going to be spelled like this. Bzzz. So let's think about what we could use to make that sound effect. Okay, so I've chosen the story that we're going to read aloud and add sound effects to. Now, the next part of the process is to help our kids think through what items do we have around us that we could use to create sound effects for our story. Well, going back to Mortimer's song that he sings, I hear the words clang, clang, and rattle, bing, bang. So, let's brainstorm. What do we already have that we could use for those sound effects? Well, obviously, since I am a music teacher and I own some of these instruments, here are some good options like the triangle instrument for the clang clang sounds. And maybe for the rattle bing bang, we're going to use some type of shakers or maracas to make our rattle sound effect. But do not panic, do not worry. You can still do this fun activity even if you don't own any types of instruments at home. So some other good options are to make body percussion sounds. What do I mean by body percussion? Things like clapping, snapping, patting different parts of our body, stomping feet, things like that. You could even bang on something like a table or a chair. Also, have your kids go around the house and search for things that they can find to create these sound effects. So, we don't own something like a triangle or a maraca type instrument, but we do have a dog collar with some really jingly tags on it, and maybe we have something like a half-empty jar of popcorn kernels in the pantry that we can pull out, and we can shake those like a maraca for the rattling sound. I just want you to be creative and use whatever you've got around you to create these sound effects for your story. Now that you have chosen your supplies that you're going to use and you've assigned your kids different parts to play throughout the book, here is a really important piece that I don't want you to miss. Make sure before you just jump in and read the story and start making all the fun sound effects that you're going to give your kids very specific guidelines about how and when to play. All right, so let me pause here for a second. I think it's okay for me to be a little bit critical because I am a homeschooler myself and I have classroom experience as well. Sometimes if our kids have not been in a classroom type situation, maybe at a co-op or some type of outside class they're taking, they may be less prone to have these types of skills like waiting their turn, showing self-control while they have to hold an instrument or some noisemaker in their hand. This is a really good opportunity for your kids not only to practice musical skills like watching a conductor or listening for when their part happens, but also working on some of these social skills like waiting patiently and practicing self-control. We've come to the most fun part now, which is where we're actually going to perform our read aloud story with kids making the different sound effects. A few things that you can do as the reader/narrator to make it more interesting is consider using voices for the different characters. You can also help out the kids who are playing along by giving them some nonverbal communication. So just point to them when it's their turn to make their sound and give them a simple cutoff signal when you want them to stop. You can learn more about those in my Conducting for Kids video, which I'll link right here. Don't miss an opportunity after the story is finished to have your kids evaluate the performance and see what they thought about it. Not in a really critical way, but more just like asking them, what did you think about that? Was it more fun when we played the sound effects? Were there parts that you thought matched really well, like this instrument made that sound effect really well? Or should we try doing it in a different way? There is nothing that says you can't repeat the activity multiple times and have them change things up, maybe even have your kids switch so they get to try different parts. Let's wrap this up by talking about 3 major benefits that your kids are going to gain through this type of read aloud activity with sound effects. The first, which I've already mentioned, are the social skills that they get to practice. So again, things like listening, patience while they're waiting their turn, and self-control when they need to hold on to some sound effect thing and wait to play at the appropriate time. Then we think about some of the musical skills that kids are practicing. First would be watching a conductor and getting their cues from that person. Second would be listening for the timing of their part. When is the appropriate time to play and how does that fit into the wider performance? And then third, this is not something I brought up earlier, but I wanted to mention a word called timbre. It's spelled like this, but it's pronounced timbre. And that basically just means what is the sound quality or tone quality of an instrument. And you can ask them, do you think the timbre of this instrument matches the sound effect that we're trying to create? Last would be the literacy skills and the enjoyment of a children's book that your kids are going to gain by doing this. So I personally believe anytime we can engage more than just one sense at a time, the stronger our kids are going to connect to a story. So think about, have you ever asked your kids to draw or maybe paint a scene from one of the books that they've read? What's happening is they're making the connection by what they heard or what they read in the story, and now they're doing something with their hands to recreate it. Well, think about this in a similar way. When we're adding on another sense of hearing and also feeling, touching, right? When they're creating sound effects through whatever medium you've chosen, they really have an even stronger connection to the story itself now. I hope you'll be brave enough to try this type of activity, whether it's in your homeschool or with a group of kids that you might be working with. See how they like it and let me know in the comments what you think about it. Please be sure to give this video a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed to Morning Basket Music for more homeschool encouragement and music teaching tips. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy music making.